from week to week on this show, the types of stories that we bring up, clearly there's never a lull in the amount of stories that we're seeing that are hitting the security world. Clearly this week is no different.
All right, so Manny, we all know about these voice-enabled products like Siri and Alexa, and it sounds like there's an interesting new, vulnerability maybe that's out there.
I'm not sure if I would call it a vulnerability yet, but yeah, it's definitely against voice assistants.
Right.
So I think we all know today, the voice assistants that are out there, your Googles and your Siris and your Alexas, and apologize for anybody who's watching this who I just tripped up their voice assistant.
Oh, right. Alexa.
Right. But this story talks about this team of researchers from, they're from, I'm going to perhaps butcher this, but Zhejiang University in China.
Okay.
And they did this research, and the paper's called Dolphin Attack, Inaudible Voice Commands. And they basically just had a premise like, hey, could we possibly enable our voice assistants to pick up basically inaudible to humans commands,
right,
and get them to actually, execute
so
those
it's
commands.
at frequencies humans can't hear.
Exactly. So,
but a device can still hear
right.
it.
So frequencies, you're talking about frequencies over 20 kilohertz.
Right.
What they found was that the assistant will actually hear these commands and actually execute those commands. They were able to, one, visit a malicious website. They were also able to spy on the user by initiating ongoing voice and phone calls. They were able to also tell the voice assistant to text perhaps somebody that they, with fake information,
right,
or
right,
perhaps even post something to Facebook that was incorrect or
right,
fake. Right? This one's kind of a stretch, I think, but they say impose a denial of service. What they call posing a denial of service, they actually mean put the phone into airplane mode, which in essence causes a denial of service on the phone.
Yeah.
Like I said, a little bit of a stretch.
Unless you're not paying attention.
Right,
but, yeah.
right. And then conceal these attacks by dimming the screen and lowering the volume of the device. They were also able to go against some of the voice assistants that are in automobiles today as well. So,
okay.
our cars now also have voice assistants, so they actually tested it against that. So changing the destination in your GPS was one of the things that they also tested and were capable of doing as well. There are a couple of things that are caveats to this that make it a little more difficult for somebody to actually use this.
The attacker needs to be very close proximity to the, whatever the handheld user is in. Otherwise, it's not going to happen.
Microphone has to be able to pick you up, so you have to be close enough. Also, on most devices, the phone has to be unlocked to take in commands. And then, again, if you're in proximity to somebody and somebody's on their phones and they have it unlocked, clearly, if you send a command to it, the phone is going to react to the command.
Right.
So there's going to be a visual that's going to give it potentially away, right?
So if I'm sitting on the subway and I'm like playing on my phone, I've got it unlocked,
right,
and you're next to me and you send me the thing, I'm going to see something happen on my phone, and I'll be like, what the heck?
Right.
I didn't say that.
Exactly.
Okay.
So those are some of the caveats that you have to be in proximity, and there's a lot of sort of variables that have to be in place in order for that attack potentially to be successful.
Right.
I don't think it's something that the general public really needs to worry about. If somebody is out there using this, it's going to be very, very targeted, and again, hard to propagate.
So they talk about like how you would test this yourself, like what kind of hardware you would need, or
so it was interesting. Yeah, so they actually mentioned in the article that the hardware that you would need in order to perpetrate this is like a $3 device that you basically hook up to your phone that would enable you to actually change the commands that you're sending into this
like ultrasonic.
Ultrasonic, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was wondering if you could just do it with Audacity or some other tool to just.
Perhaps.
I don't really know. I'm not good with sound, to be honest with you. So, but it's interesting. Yeah, I never really thought about that, but it makes sense.
Yeah.
That that's a possible attack, and like teenagers can hear frequencies that adults can't, and as you get older, your ability to hear higher frequencies goes down.
Right.
So, or even other animals can hear higher frequencies than we can. So why can't a phone, and why couldn't you use that as a kind of covert means to communicate with a device? Kind of interesting.
Yeah.
Maybe that's why they call it dolphin attack.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure that's why. Yeah, they
Right.
like the little twist or whatever on the words and make it
Little squeaky chirps that
Right.
dolphins make.
Right, exactly, exactly.
At this point, it's not per se vulnerability, it's a research topic. But at the same time, I think some of the vendors are already taking a look at it.
I think right now what we're seeing is just kind of the entry into this. Again, very research oriented this paper was. I don't think the big makers like Apple and Google are going off and, really going to, start to provide patches for any of this stuff. I think they'll certainly start to look at it. Certainly it's going to go onto their radar to look at, and perhaps there are some things that they can do to mitigate this on the back end.
All right, so Ganesh, you were looking at a story, I guess it's kind of like point and click ransomware for mobile devices. They have some new developer kits that make it real easy.
It's really interesting. They have kind of software development kits. We can call it, Trojan development kits. You can build your own ransomware for Android. Any user without any technical background and coding experience can go and grab this specific app and follow the instructions on the screen, and anybody can create a ransomware for Android.
It's not so much the ransomware itself, it's the method by which the ransomware is created. People with absolutely no coding skills whatsoever can go in, purchase, and customize a piece of ransomware that they now can use.
The options you can customize is the type of, the message. A message in the sense once you...
What they have to do to...
Yeah, like instructions to
Right.
follow. They also produce the key. Key in the sense is actually a pin to unlock the device because it's a mobile phone. Mm-hmm. They also have a little bit of basically, randomization with the variants to build. I think they're following here again software development models.
Oh, so like from executable to executable that gets
Executable.
built, there's some variation that might trip up antivirus
Yes.
a little bit? Okay.
So that it's not easy to reverse engineer some, basically malware analysis
Okay.
to figure it out what's really going on. But this can be done less than a time I talked about. Basically, you click on the download the app, follow the instructions, you pick what you want, how much money you want. This is so easy.
Obviously, the process is made as easy as possible. So the only thing that's left after this whole thing is how do you deliver it? You pay the price, but now it's on you to go ahead and deliver this. So I'm assuming they delivered to you in some sort of APK or...
Oh, it will be like an app. If you go to, instead of going to the trusted sources, the Play Store, the Google Store and Apple stores.
Right.
If you go to questionable websites, probably you will get it.
Right.
Right.
But I
So
think
that would
it's
be-
a trust, yeah.
Right, that would be the thing I would tell people is don't install apps from untrustworthy sites, which is a little bit easier to sideload apps on Android than it is on iOS. Because you try to upload this to the Google Play Store, I'm going to
It's not
guess they're
going
going to like squash it immediately.
Right.
So it's going to have to be on like these third-party app stores and stuff like that.
Yeah,
that
and
would
like you
probably
said,
see it.
on forums, and I think that those are kinds of places where people are like, they make entries into forums that say, oh, hey, you want to download the latest, movie streamer. Here's an APK, and you call it, best movie downloader, .apk.
Or a hacked version of some game that
Right.
gives you whatever, some extra
Extra credits or
Yeah,
something.
something like that.
And then and then you get them to download us, and obviously you get them. But
But the takeaway is it's so easy. We may see, actually surging in different variants of ransomware because there's no technical background needed.
Right.
I mean, coming to the best practices, as we always tell about the ransomware, I think already we discussed, don't get any apps from untrustworthy sources. Need to have good verified backups. Just having backups is not good enough. Maybe some sort of, I'm guessing, mobile-based antivirus security-related
And
solutions.
they have some for Android,
Yes.
so you're better off there than maybe in the iOS space.
iOS
but,
space.
Right, that's a good suggestion.
again, I don't know how random you can actually make your piece of ransomware, but hopefully the antivirus makers today can find some way to start picking it up,
Yeah.
regardless of what variant gets pushed out of this particular app.
My concern would be that the barrier to entry is very low into getting into the ransomware game.
True. Yep.
Whereas, previously you had to have some kind of knowledge to know how to build an app, how to do some coding, but this is kind of point and click. Just build it for me. I fill out a form of what I want it to look like and do, and it builds it for me, and then I can distribute it. So makes it really easy.
The ease of useness maybe, invite lots of, young users, even for the sake of trying it. You try and see how it works, that also causes some sort of damage. Mm-hmm. So it actually increases the surface of the attack, actually.
Right. Yeah, hopefully it's not a trend that we're going to continue to see more and more advanced, whatever, what's it called, a TDK? What's that stand
Trojan Development Kit.
Trojan Development Kit. Hopefully we don't see more and more of those in the mobile space, but you never know.
You never know. I hope to. It's so simple. I mean, it's scary at the same time because, the surgence of ransomware may increase because of this existence of a specific app.
All right, guys, so I guess we'll take a look at the internet weather for this week. And this is the most probe ports. So this is like all scanning activity across the board. And normally I don't pay too much attention to this chart. However, we had a couple of things rise to the top that I think warrant a little bit more attention. So port 8080 TCP jumped up 7 positions, and port 8545 TCP jumped up 10 positions. We'll take a look at a chart on those in a minute and get a little bit more discussion on them. But let's just jump ahead to the most sources probing. This is the one I typically tend to focus more attention on because it's usually more indicative of many machines scanning on ports at once. So it's usually an indicator of botnet related activity. And as we can see, 23 TCP, Telnet, we know that that's a lot of those IoT embedded Linux devices we see all the time. We've been talking about it for years. 445 TCP is risen back to the top, or near the top. That's related to the WannaCry ransomware and some of these other vulnerabilities. And then 5358 TCP is up there now in the top 10. It usually is not, and it's resurfaced again. It's one of these mystery ports. We're going to take a closer look at that one as well. And a lot of the other ones, not really surprising. So let's take a look at some of the ports that we did call out specifically. So port 8080 TCP, this is the scan probes on it, not number of scan SIPs. So this is just en masse, like how much scanning activity in general. And really there's not a lot of actors, well, there's always a constant stream of actors scanning on 8080 TCP, but there's not a whole bunch of actors responsible for this big spike over here. So it's kind of not a spike that we traditionally look at or see with botnet traffic. But you can see there's kind of a noise floor, there's some spikiness here, and you can see there's definitely a much more concentrated, prolonged amount of scanning that has occurred on 8080 TCP. A lot of times, port 8080 is used for administrative web interfaces. That's probably what people are searching for. Also proxy servers.
Yep.
Yeah.
So could be that. And this recent spike is primarily from a very small number of sources in France. So, and it's actually like a web hosting kind of company in France. So it's probably not good, but it's not a whole lot of people doing it. So, but just something to keep in mind if you have that port exposed for something of yours. Tomcat is another one. There's a lot of these, like that's an administrative interface that is exposed on port 8080. If you use those types of things, you should be mindful of whether they're exposed to the internet or not, because you probably don't want them to be. This one was interesting. So when I saw 8545, I think you mentioned to me before we started, Ganesh, you're like, what is that? And I said the same thing. It's not familiar to me, 8545. It's actually unassigned. There is nobody registered for this port. And I have a 90-day chart here, so you can kind of see there really wasn't much of anything. And again, this is scan probes. This is not, it's 20 million scan probes per hour, about 10 million, 20 million constantly. Then it jumped up here to, maybe peaks of like 70 million. But now we're getting another big resurgence up here. And that's only within the past 3 days or something that it really almost doubled in the amount of scan probes that we see on this port.
It's a pretty consistent number right there for a good amount of months.
Right, because there's very few actual sources involved in this scanning when you actually look at it. So you have a very small number, like a handful, let's say less than 100, involved in this scanning. And then when they do it, they're doing it, at consistent levels. Whereas with botnets, you get tens of thousands of devices at once doing it. So when I looked, EMC2 Legato, which is like a backup tool, has been known to use this port. iTunes Radio Stream has been known to use this port. And then another product that I'd never heard of before called Ethereum, which is a Bitcoin type wallet. It's like a distributed Bitcoin wallet. And I didn't really read up on it entirely other than finding out that it uses that port as part of its service. When I looked at the sources, there's a very small number of them scanning on this, a few in the US, a few in Russia, and that's it. So then I looked in our honeypot. So the US sources I found interesting because they do this post request, kind of a goofy post request because they're missing a lot of things like a user agent, they're missing a host field, missing a lot of things. But it is a JSON object that they send. So they're posting a JSON object to whoever's going to listen. When I looked up this string, this is Ethereum. So Ethereum, like I said, is some kind of distributed Bitcoin wallet thing that I don't really know much about. But that could just be like normal peer discovery related to Ethereum. That's my guess. Or it could be somebody looking specifically for it. Maybe they know something about it, or they know a vulnerability about it that nobody else knows.
Right.
I'm not really sure. The Russian sources are doing something different, which I thought was interesting. And I actually thought there might be a bug. So I was trapping more traffic to make sure I didn't have a bug in our honeypot. But what I see is what I see. And I'll point out why this is weird. So they're doing a post. At least they have a correct host field. They have a real user agent field, or a relative, I have a user agent field at all. They're specifying a content length of 66, but there's no content. So I thought that was strange. So that's why I was like, is this making a mistake? Or is my honeypot making a mistake? Or are they making a mistake? I think they might be making a mistake, whatever these devices are doing. And what their intent is, I don't know. Maybe they're also trying to find Ethereum stuff, but they're not getting the JSON object pushed into the body here. I'm not sure. But still to be figured out in any event. So that's one to keep an eye on, I guess, because we have seen some increased traffic on there. And if anybody knows, please chime in, send us an email.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see if this activity remains over the next couple of weeks. See if
Right, especially if it stays up in the top 10, because we had never seen it up in there.
It's the first time I have seen it bubble up to the top. I think it's at this time it seems to be related to some sort of IoT related malware. But the jury is still out. I think we will come up with more answers in the coming weeks as we learn more about this port.
So then kind of rounding out, these are the ones that are related to botnet related activity. This is a 5-year chart. I've been doing these really long-term charts, especially for ports that we've seen being scanned for a long period of time to kind of get a good idea of the trend involved in them. And a lot of this is decay from Conficker and some of these other families of malware. But then when the shadow brokers released the dump of these exploits like Eternal Blue, Eternal Romance, Eternal Synergy, and then WannaCry started using it, right where this very significant spike comes out here, that's when WannaCry was the initial outbreak occurred. Since that time, we've seen this escalation of more and more scan sources. So we went from what I thought was a good trend of getting downward of around 10,000 scan sources per hour as kind of our base floor, to now we're back up to even above where we were 5 years ago. So we're up at like 45,000 scan sources per hour as WannaCry and some of these other families of malware that use these vulnerabilities are trying to spread themselves. And that's kind of important. WannaCry is a worm. It acts like a worm, and by finding devices listening on port 445, infecting them, and then that one will start to find others and infect them.
Yeah, and as in typical worms, anybody who's dealing with it will immediately know how difficult it is actually to control it. So
Yeah.
once you have a box out there, because of its worm abilities, it finds the next host that is
Yeah.
potentially vulnerable pretty quickly,
Right.
based on the
Having
way
good
that WannaCry works.
patching policies, especially in your enterprise. So get everything patched,
Yep.
because if you don't, if you have small pockets, just one can start going and find all the others that aren't patched also, and and then they create a lot of noise on your network because they get really busy scanning and trying to break into other machines as part of their worming process. So yeah, you're right. It is very difficult.
It's really interesting to see, actually from the configure levels, they came down, kind of normalized. I mean, they were at the lowest levels I think at the end of last quarter and up to first quarter.
Right, beginning
And then-
of this year, really, yeah.
And then again, actually really spiked up at least 4 times
Yeah.
compared to the last 5
It's
years.
kind of disappointing because it did really come all the way down, right?
Yeah.
And when it was back in the configure days, which is even before where this chart really is,
Yeah.
it was probably way up here, and it's come down, and it's gradually gone all the way down. And I'll bet that we continue to see this go up before it goes down again. So make sure you have your devices patched. I think most enterprises do. The people who are probably not patching are home users or people who have illegal copies of Microsoft Windows that are, not really getting the patches maybe because it's not a legitimate copy. And then lastly, our mystery port. Still don't really have a clear concept of why this is. Been trying to capture in our honeypots any of these attempts coming in, but I haven't been able to do so successfully yet. But this goes back a full year, and back at the end of last year, in the December timeframe, we had some amount of scanning, like around 7,000 scan sources on this port 5358. And it went from nothing to a whole bunch, and then back to nothing again. And then it took off, and it went all the way up to like 60,000 scan sources per hour, which is a lot. That's a lot of scan sources per hour to see, because it's probably hundreds of thousands when you put them across a daily time frame in terms of unique source IPs. It had since come down, and these kinds of patterns of this is a real botnet-like kind of decay pattern. So it went and went and went until it stopped again, and then it started to come up again. So I don't really have a good explanation for it. Some people have theorized that it might be related to the Light Hydra botnet, which is another family of malware for these IoT embedded Linux devices, but I'm not convinced. I like to actually see the actual packets and see what they're trying to do, and I haven't been able to do that yet. So purpose is still unknown on this one, and I guess we'll just try to keep looking at it and study it. Hopefully we'll get a chance before it goes away again, assuming it does go away again.
Right. Even if you capture the traffic, it's not that you'll be able to tell, perhaps, but it's clearly it'll give you a better chance of understanding what this actually is. So I know having unknowns like this are somewhat bothersome for you.
Yeah,
So.
I don't like having unknowns. So almost everything else we can explain.
Right.
Usually, this one's kind of persisted for a while, and I haven't been able to explain what it is or why it's there. So it'd be a good one to figure out for sure, just so we can sleep at night.
Yeah.
With the rise of connected things, there's so many connected things. There's always something coming up. It's also sometimes even though the specific malware botnet is dormant for some time, if they have some updates or revisions, there's a possibility it may come up.
Some of the stories we're talking about, sort of researchy, but again, we've seen researchy things in the past turn into full-blown vulnerabilities, down the road. And then, obviously today what we're seeing is, again, another story that's talking about the ease at which now potential bad actors out there can get their hands on malicious, files and malicious campaigns that they now can launch to make money for themselves. So, we're seeing that sort of making it much easier for the layman to just, boot up their machine or get onto their phone and download something to potentially start making money.